Okay. Um, I have finished reading Bardic Course from Grove of Dana, and I don't know if that's going to come through very well. New Order of Druids. And apparently there are 2 orders of Druids that are mentioned in this book. I guess the New Order is from Europe, and then there's an American version. Because the forward in here, let me see if I can find it really quick. I guess that's not really quick, huh? No, it's not very quick. But she does have an online course called Grove of Dana Online College of Druidism in 2004. I have not gone looking for it. Right now, I don't intend to. But again, this is the first of 4 books. Tomorrow, I should start reading this one. This is book number 2. If you notice, number 2 is thinner than book number 1, which I thought was rather strange. Again, the reason I am reading these books is sorry, I looked at the light and I'm kind of blinded. Wow. Okay. The reason I'm reading these books is because when I started my spiritual journey, I was told my path was Druidism, but the old style. Okay. So when I released my rune book, I called it Druidic Rune Path. And of course, there's very few sales on it because I put Druid and Rune together. And modern history says that doesn't exist, doesn't happen. And I did some little bit of digging in there, and apparently I'm not the only one that has put Druids and runes together. What I find interesting is back during the Dark Ages, Christianity burned everything they didn't want you to know about. They murdered everybody who had any kind of, intelligence. Yet people think that what they're being told is true. I understand there's archaeological evidence, but only the people who tote the party line are getting funding. I am looking at all of what's out there, including what's not getting proper funding. Okay? There's some very interesting things out there. Just saying. Just saying. We need to look at everything, not just the approved sources. Think about that. The news is not the only thing that's fake. A lot of our history is too. And part of this spiritual path is learning to use discernment. Discernment is vital if we want to walk the path of truth, which, interestingly enough, this is all about truth. Almost every single one of the folktale stories in this book is about truth. The number of devices used in the various folklore stories in there for truth was astounding. What it shows me is humanity has a very long history of not living in truth. Very long history. Okay? So, there's that. So, I am going to go through all 4 of these books, because that's the plan right now. That may change. I still intend on my next actual book that I produce to be on sacred geometry. So I don't know if I'm going to be using any of the content I find in, that I learned from these books in that next book or not. That remains to be seen at this point. I just want an understanding of the thought process of modern druids. What does that even mean? And after having read that book, I have notes and I'm still not sure. So I want to go through some of the things I got from this book. Now understand, when I wrote things down from this book somewhere. Okay, I thought I took more pages of notes than I did. Wow. I took a page and a half of notes. This book is 167 pages. I took a page and a half of notes. Wow. Okay. So when I took my notes, I paraphrased all my notes. So if anything that I say sounds like it's an exact writing from the book, it's not intended to be. I'm speaking from what I have written down here. Now, one thing I did learn is that I'm not that interested in Druidic folklore from Ireland. The definition of Druidic folklore is still up in the air for me. Very much so. I have roots from Ireland. I am part Irish. The author has been called to visit sacred sites in Ireland multiple times, and she discusses that. I think one of my favorite things about the book, you read through the entire thing and you don't know her stance on anything. It's regaling of stories, the folklore that she has found, and information from people who've studied the data she's sharing. She's got lots of footnotes in there, further reading. There are some exercises in there, some meditations. The exercises and meditations are further on in the book, so you get a good solid information thing before you start getting into exercises. Really, I have no complaints about the book, nothing. But I'll share my comments. I do have page numbers, which I will also share. I do suggest anybody who's interested in a bard path or a druid path to read this book. And there's a whole chapter in here that I suggest that anybody on the spiritual path, period, should read. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Okay. Also, normally I try to keep my videos 20 minutes or less, but as with my commentary on the Emerald Tablets, I may bust that. I'll try not to, though. So she opens up talking about, what's a druid and things like that. And so basically in the very beginning pages that I'm going to get into here, that's what we're discussing. Druidism is rooted in earth, as we all know. Interdependence of all aspects, such as the mountains, animals, all that stuff. Ancient Druidism focused on animals, earth, and a culture that cultivated the two, which very much jives with what I have been informed for ancient Druidism. Now, yeah, the reason she breaks that down there is because a lot of the Druids realized that the way Druidism was back when it was founded cannot fit into modern society. It just can't. If you want to live in modern society, you cannot live in an ancient Druidic fashion. Okay. On page 12, communication is required between aspects of nature that results in a shift in culture to be more in balance with nature. Druids once performed the wedding between the king and the lady of the land. Now, there's actually a couple of stories in there talking about that and the status of the king versus the druid versus the bard. And that was very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Again, if this is a topic of interest for you, you're very much going to want to read those tales, because I am not going to regale those tales to you. There's a lot of interesting things in there. Yeah. They also conducted all the festivities that kept the people engaged with the turning of the seasons. So the druid was kind of like the cultural leader, encouraging people to perform these the rituals and things like that. But the druid was the main person connecting the culture with nature. Druidism is not a religion or conglomeration of thoughts. It is a way of life. My thing with that is every religion says that it is a way of life. I don't know any druids, anybody who claims to be a druid, so I can't say that modern day druids are living by this or not. But I have never met somebody who said that their religion was a way of life, that it's not a religion, that's a way of life, and they're actually living by what their way of life is supposed to be like, based on the tenets that they claim that they follow. Okay, I'm just going to throw that out there. She says that Druidism has 9 dimensions according to what people state, but she prefers to call them strands, and I agree with not calling them dimensions after I read them, because they're not what is traditionally called a dimension. It depends on how you define that word. And spiritualism defines it way differently than the way it's described in this text. So, druids are historians and wise men, which makes sense. Also, artists. Pick one. Whichever art you want. Because art represents the sacred. And there's actually a neat thing towards the end of this book on cauldrons, where the heart center is considered the artistry, but she mentions something else in that section that, to me, that the heart-centered cauldron is actually the destiny. It's actually your destiny. It's your version of what art you're supposed to be participating in your life. It's part of that destiny. Healing is one. So we got historian, wise men, art, healing, metaphysical, seership. Basically, that includes the divination stuffs. And I got additional stuffs in here, explanations on what she was saying on that. But I don't think I need to get into those. If you don't know what those words mean and you're interested in spiritualism, You need to look them up. Number 6 is ritual, which everybody should have daily ritual of some kind. Natural philosophy. If you're interested in Druidism, that should be a no-brainer. Teaching and service. Number 9 is service. And in my notes, I put down to see if I could correlate these to sacred geometry in terms of the order that was placed in there. I have a feeling there's a potential there. Okay, so that's pages 11 through 15. Now, there's a correlation that she's got on page 60. In one of the folklore stories, knowledge is in the west, battle is in the north, philosophy is in the east, prosperity is in the east, music is in the south, and kingship is in the center. And she's comparing these to a psychologist named Jung, J-U-N-G. And she puts his things, intuition in the west, thinking in the north, sensation in the east, feeling in the south, and individualization in the middle. And I put on here that I want to see how that correlates to the runic circle, because I think that'd be an interesting way to check that out. Battle does not necessarily mean going out on a battlefield and shooting each other or stabbing each other with spears or whatever. Battle can also be that back and forth you have in your mind when you're making a decision. Because this is in the north, and on the runic circle, potential is in the north. Okay, so that's where everything is, where you're trying to decide, what do you want to do? All your potential is there, right? What do you want to use this potential to create? And that can easily be considered a battle. Do you want to be an artist? What kind of artist? Are you a better painter? Are you a better writer? Are you a better cook? Are you superior origami? That's an art. It's an internal fight within yourself to decide how best to use that potential. So that very much correlates to the runic circle. So that's part of what this, my notes is to go back and check and see what I can correlate and apply to my own druidic path. Okay, for the Irish Druidism on page 75, their 3 realms are the sea, land, and sky. I found that interesting. Basically, that's as above, so below, sky and sea. I'm definitely gonna look into this some more, because I have so many thoughts up here on that one that, yeah, I'll have to save that for later, because there's just too much. Okay. The traditional feasts, according to this book on page 83, are for Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lughnasadh. Sorry on pronunciations because I have heard them pronounced different ways. So there you go. And those are the first days of winter, spring, summer, and fall, which is fact. Not what we celebrate as the first day, because those are the mid days. These are the beginning days. She talks about what they mean, but this right here actually correlates with what I wrote in my Druidic Rune Path book. Directly correlates. You know, and I conferred with my guides on that before I wrote that book, and she's in agreement with me on that one, or I'm in agreement with her. Well, she probably wrote her book before I did, but because I wrote mine, I think I initially published it in 2021. So yeah, I definitely published mine way after she published hers. Oh, this one is a direct quote. She says on page 101, we need to turn our ego into a right relationship with the soul. I thought that was very interesting. The reason I thought that is there are a lot of people out there who think that they need to kill their ego and strange things like that. One of the teachers that I follow on YouTube, she used to actually hold retreats for just that purpose. And I think it was 2020. Yeah, it was the end of 2020. I got on a live with her, and I told her about my experience of kind of befriending my ego and establishing a relationship there. And she told me that I was ahead of a lot of people, because there's a lot of people out there who still believe that they need to kill their ego. We have ego for a reason, right? It's just the way we're raised, we don't understand what the relationship with that ego is supposed to be. And as a result, we think we need to kill it in order to be able to put ourselves in the position that we need to be in. If you create a hostile relationship with your ego, that will make your spiritual path harder, not easier. Harder. You can have a hard path, you can have an easy path. It's really up to you how you want your spiritual journey to be. Your choice. Oh, so on page 129, we're still talking about ego. So I used arrows here. Decisions made by ego, then an arrow, not in line with spiritual journey. Another arrow. Stokes societal issues. If you remain in ego, nothing good can come of that. You have to establish a positive relationship with your ego. Put your ego in the place it's supposed to be in, so that your spiritual journey can take place and we can make a positive impact on the society. We can create the society that we actually want to live in, not this divisive society that we're in. Yeah, I liked that portion there. And then on page 130, there's an exercise to train the brain to be inclusive of all senses. I thought it was a very interesting exercise. So if you're having trouble with that one, and I'm sure most of you are, because we are all trained to use our eyesight and ignore all the other ones, buy the book. Okay, page 150. Our ancestors are integral to Druidism returning to humanity. Yeah, we are all trying to remember who we are. And we do that by remembering where we came from. The cauldron meditation thing I mentioned, where the heart thing, is on page 155. And then the last thing I have written down on here is that everyone needs to read chapter 24. There's 25 chapters, but chapter 24, it's not overly long, but it's a pretty powerful chapter. If you don't want to buy the book to read just the one chapter, see if your local library has this book. Or you can read the whole book and gain the bits of wisdom that are in there. Because there is quite a bit of wisdom. Okay? She knows what she's talking about. I think that's all I have. Yeah, that's all my notes, and I can't think of anything else I wanted to say. So, thank you for watching. I do plan on doing a video like this for the other 3 books that are in this series. I also have her book called Sacred Actions, which I also highly suggest getting. And that is actions we can take based on the Wheel of the Year. How to get more in tune with who we are, in tune with nature. It's a very interesting book. She gives examples of what you can do based on whatever walk of life you're in. If you're stuck in a city, if you live in the middle of nowhere. She also had examples for living in the suburbs. She's lived in all 3 places, so she's got experience in giving you examples of what you can do in those locations. So that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.